Hi, this is Kathy with Barefoot Mountain School of Herbs, and in this video we're going to talk about how to make an herbal tincture. We'll talk about folk tinctures and professional tinctures. We'll talk about a few rules of thumb for what goes into making a tincture, and at the end of the video we're going to go over some math to how to figure out how to make your own tinctures. The information presented in this video is intended for educational purposes only and is not meant to give any medical advice, diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. Please do your own research and prayerfully make your own decisions regarding your use of herbal medicines. Okay, the first thing we're going to talk about is what is a tincture. And the actual definition of a tincture is an alcohol extract of the constituents of an herb. Now you'll hear a lot of things called tinctures and herbs that are soaked in glycerin, which are actually glycerites, herbs that are soaked in vinegar, that sort of thing. But an actual tincture is an alcohol extract. A tincture is a great long-lasting way to preserve the medicinal qualities of an herb. A tincture can last up to 7 years and beyond. And tinctures are a convenient way of using herbal medicines. They're small, you can carry them with you in a little dropper bottle. They're already prepared. They're just very convenient and a good way to use herbal medicine. Now, the first thing I want to talk about are folk tinctures. And folk tinctures are very simple, but I don't want to downplay the importance of them. They have been used that way for many, many years, and they are very effective. And a lot of times that's what I'll do is a folk tincture. So all you have to do is place your herb in a jar, cover it with the desired amount of vodka. I usually cover it to about a quarter to a half an inch above the herb. Shake it every day for 6 weeks, and then press it out and strain it, and you have a folk tincture. And don't ever underestimate the effectiveness of these. And sometimes that's just what you need to do, especially if you're in a hurry or you don't have time to look up the information on it or that sort of thing. There is nothing wrong with just bringing in your herb and doing a folk tincture. Okay, so now we're going to go over the steps to making a professional herbal tincture. But first, we need to go over some equipment and supplies you might want to consider to make tincture making easier for you. First of all, we want bowls. You want glass bowls of different sizes. You'll need them to chop up your herb in. You need them to weigh your herb in. So you need bowls. You need a good pair of scissors to get your herb chopped up and in small pieces for your tincture. These are a pair of herb scissors that look kind of neat. I don't own a pair, but I think I might get some. They just look like they would make chopping up the herb very easy. Of course, you can always use an electric chopper if that's what you want to do. Jars. You need jars for everything. You need jars to put your tinctures in to shake them. You need jars to store your tinctures in. There's nothing wrong with recycling jars, washing out your jelly jars or your salsa jars or whatever you need to do, but you just need a bunch of jars when you're an herbalist. Lids. These are plastic lids that I really like. They have a little gasket inside that makes them waterproof, that you can shake them all day. The two-piece mason jar lids will leak on you sometimes, so I just ordered a bunch of these for my herbal tinctures. Measuring cups. You'll need the big ones, you'll need the small ones, especially if you're making a little small tincture. Don't forget to get measuring cups that go down to the ounce and half an ounce and that sort of thing. You need a scale. This is a digital scale. You want one that will tare, so that if you put a bowl on it and then you hit the tare, it'll zero it out, so it doesn't weigh the bowl. It just weighs the herb in the bowl. You'll need some Everclear, and you need 190 proof. I think that's the way it is. It's 100% pure grain alcohol, basically. Even though nothing can be completely 100%, it's as close as you can get. So Everclear, or as high proof as you can get of pure grain alcohol. Spring water. You'll want spring water or distilled water. You don't want to use tap water because of the chlorine and the fluoride in it. Now this is a potato ricer, and it's great for pressing out your herbal tinctures. The highest quality of tincture is right around the herb, so you want to be sure that you press out all the liquid, especially that the liquid that is right around the herb. So this does a good job for that. You can also spring for a tincture press, especially if you're going to be making a lot of tinctures or big tinctures. You want a coffee filter for straining. You can leave your tincture after you press it out. You can leave it like that with the sediment and the cloudiness. But if you want it nice and clear and pretty, and probably make it last longer, then you need to run it through a coffee filter. Of course, some rubber bands so that you can secure your filter to your mason jar. And bottles. You need bottles with lids, and you need bottles with droppers, and bottles with spray lids, and that sort of thing. Labels. You need to label everything that you make, and that just makes it a lot easier. Okay, so this is our process for making a professional tincture from fresh herb. Now, if you have dried herb, you just skip these first few steps. But if you have fresh herb and you bring it home, step 1, you want to garble your herb. That is the process of picking through your herb and removing any unwanted parts. So if you have any leaves that are maybe yellowed or dry and crumbly, or you have, pieces of grass that don't belong in, that sort of thing, you just need to go through it pretty well. And that process is called garbling. Okay, after you've got that done, then the next step is to begin cutting your herbs into tiny little pieces. And this is a picture of the herb. This is some purple dead nettle that I had gotten, and this is the picture of it after I've gotten it all chopped up into tiny little pieces and ready to go into the tincture jar. And then step 3, you want to place a clean bowl on your scale and make sure it is tared to 0 so that the scale doesn't weigh your bowl, it just weighs the herb. Okay, in step 4, you're going to weigh your mark. Now the mark is another word for the herb that is used in making an herbal preparation. So you'll hear that term mark for that just is the herb that you've prepared. Okay, and then you want to, step 5, make note of the weight of your mark. Okay, in step 6, you want to place your mark in a clean jar. Okay, step 7. We're going to figure out how much menstruum we'll need. Now the menstruum is the solvent or liquid used in a tincture or herbal extract to pull the constituents from the herb. Most of the time this is going to be made up of our pure grain alcohol and spring water. We're going to do this in a 1:3 ratio, which means 1 part mark, which is your herb, to 3 parts menstruum, which is your liquid. So remember that our weight was 1.1 ounce. So we're going to round that down to 1 ounce. So at our 1:3 ratio, that is 1 ounce times 3 is 3. So we're going to need 3 ounces of menstruum for this tincture. Okay, so step 8. We're going to figure out what your menstruum will consist of. And remember, that's the liquid. We're going to use pure grain alcohol and spring water. 50% pure grain alcohol, which means 50% will be spring water. And since we have 3 ounces of menstruum, half will be pure grain alcohol and half will be spring water. So 1.5 ounces of alcohol and 1.5 ounces of spring water is what our 3 ounces of menstruum will be made up of. Okay, so we'll mix up our menstruum in maybe a measuring cup or something like that, and then just pour it over the mark or the herb that's in the jar. Close your lid tightly, and you want to shake it for a good 30 seconds to a minute. And step 10, you want to put your jar in a cool, dark place, and then you want to shake it every day for 6 weeks. Okay, so after your 6 weeks are over, you want to thoroughly press out your tincture. This is when you want to use your potato ricer, or if you don't have one, people have used plates in over a colander and that sort of thing. Just press it out really good because you want to get all the liquid out of it that you can. And then you just want to run your tincture through a coffee filter or a tightly woven cloth, and that will get out the cloudy or any sediment that's in it. It'll just make it look nice and clear. And then you just bottle your tincture and put a label on it. You want to label it with, of course, the herb that's in there, the ratio, and also the percentage of pure grain alcohol that you used, and the date, of course. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some rules of thumb for making tinctures. A lot of people ask, how am I going to know what ratio to use or what percentage of pure grain alcohol am I going to use in the tincture? And that comes with time. As you learn each individual herb, you'll learn, from research how the best way is to extract the constituents from the herb. So each one might be a little bit different, but there are some rules of thumb that you can go by. For instance, most fresh herb, above ground parts, like the leaf or the flower or the stem, the tinctures are made in a 1:2 or 1:3 ratio, and many times they'll use 100% pure grain alcohol. PGA stands for pure grain alcohol, because they're so wet to begin with. So the alcohol just pulls out the water and the constituents from the herb. Now, most dried herbs are prepared in a 1:4 or 1:5 ratio, and I'm talking about above ground dried herbs, and they are a mixture of pure grain alcohol and water. Now, most fresh root or bark tinctures are made in a 1:3 or 1:4 ratio with 100% pure grain alcohol. Sometimes it'll be 50%, and have some water. It depends on how wet the root is, but most roots are pretty wet, so you probably, with most of them, use 100% pure grain alcohol. Of course, with most dried root or bark tincture, they're going to be made in a 1:4 or 1:5 ratio with a mixture of pure grain alcohol and water. Okay, so I wanted to go over some questions that I get a lot of. And of course, the first one most everybody asks is, how do I know what ratio and percentage of pure grain alcohol to use? And that comes from experience. It comes from studying each individual herb. But there are books that will tell you, and lists, and sometimes glossaries in the back of herb books will tell you, what ratios and what percentages to use. So then the next question is, I have found 2 different sources online, and each one of them is calling for a different ratio and percentage of pure grain alcohol. How do I know what to do? Well, you have to make your own decision what you're going to do with your tincture. Like I tell my students all the time, this is an art, not a science, and it is something that you have to develop as time goes on. So, like at one time, I did my berberine tinctures in 70% pure grain alcohol because that's what an herbalist said that it should be done. But I found that the ones that I made with 50% actually worked better for me. So you have to make that call on your own. You have to make your own decision for your own art. And then the last question, I realized after I finished my tincture that I made a mistake on my math. Is my tincture ruined? No. As I have been saying, this is an art, not a science. Your tincture is what it is. You might have to use a little bit more of it if it's a little bit weak. You might have to water it down if it's a little too strong, but it is still a good tincture. It's still a good medicine. Okay, so now we're going to go over a little bit of the math of figuring out tinctures for those who are, concerned that they don't understand it. I'm going to be honest, most of the time I keep mine simple. I usually do 100% pure grain alcohol, or I do 50% alcohol and 50% spring water. I hardly ever do anything other than that. But I want you all to know how to do it. If you do decide that you want to go by some of the instructions in the glossaries of books or that sort of thing, or you see online, to do a 35% alcohol, I want you all to know how to do that. So we're going to go over some problems with that. Okay, the first problem that we're going to go over is you have 3 ounces of fresh barberry root bark that you have dug up out of the ground. You've got the inner bark scraped off and you're ready to make a tincture out of it. And you've researched the herb, and a prominent herbalist suggests that barberry should be tinctured in a 1:4 ratio at 70% pure grain alcohol. So the first thing you're going to do is calculate the amount of menstruum that you'll need. And of course our ratio is 1:4. So you have 3 ounces of bark, and so 3 times 4 is 12. So you're going to have 12 ounces of menstruum. Okay, so now that you know you have 12 ounces of menstruum, you're going to calculate how much of that liquid is going to be alcohol and how much will be spring water. Okay, so your menstruum is going to be 70% up here. You want it 70% alcohol. So the first thing you want to do is change that percentage to a decimal. Basic math, you move your decimal 2 places to the left, so it's going to be 0.70. And then you multiply 12, your 12 ounces menstruum, times 0.70. And your result is 8.4. And of course, I would round this up to 8.5 or 8.5, or you could round it down to 8. It's up to you. Which would mean you would need 8.5 ounces of alcohol. So the rest of the 12 ounces is going to be made up of 3.5 ounces of spring water. Okay, so now you're going to get yourself a little measuring cup and put 8.5 ounces of pure grain alcohol in it, and then add 3.5 ounces of spring water to make 12 ounces of menstruum. Then you're going to put your 3 ounces of barberry root in a jar, and then pour your 12 ounces of menstruum over it, close it up, and shake it. Okay, for our next problem, you've gone out and got some, actually you bought some dried mullein leaf, and you have 2.1 ounces of it, and you would like to tincture it. You researched it and decided you'd like to tincture the herb in a 1:3 ratio in 65% pure grain alcohol. So of course our first step is always to calculate the amount of menstruum that you need. Our ratio is 1:3. You have 2.1 ounces of herb, so you times that times 3 and you get 6.3, or you round it up to 6.5 or 6.5 ounces. So then your next step is to figure out what the 6.5 ounces of menstruum is going to be made up of. So you're going to have to calculate how much of that liquid will be pure grain alcohol and how much will be spring water. So if your menstruum is going to be 65% pure grain alcohol, you have to calculate 65% of the 6.5 ounces. So you'll multiply 6.5 or 6.5 times 0.65, and your result is 4.2. So I would round that down to 4 ounces, which would mean that you'd need 4 ounces of pure grain alcohol, and the rest of that 6.5 ounces, which is going to be 2.5 ounces, will be spring water. So you'll take your little measuring cup with the spout and add 4 ounces of pure grain alcohol to it, and then add your 2.5 ounces of spring water so that you have 6.5 ounces of menstruum. And then you pour that over top of your dried mullein leaf, and you put the lid on it and you shake it, and your tincture is done. Okay, for our third problem, you've gone out and you picked yourself some fresh honeysuckle flowers, and you're going to make yourself a nice antiviral tincture with it. And you weigh it and you find out that you have 4.3 ounces and you would like to tincture it. So you've researched it before you went, hopefully, and decided you're going to make your tincture in a 1-to-2 ratio in 80% pure grain alcohol because it's wet. Your little flowers are wet, so you're going to use a lot of the alcohol. So step 1, you calculate the amount of menstruum that you need. Of course, your ratio is 1-to-2, and you have 4.3 ounces of flowers, and you just times that times 2, which is 8.6. I'd round that down to 8.5. So you're going to need 8.5 ounces of menstruum. Okay, so now you're going to calculate how much of that menstruum is going to be alcohol and how much is going to be water. So you're going to do a 80% alcohol. So you want to calculate 80% of 8.5 ounces. So you'll multiply 8.5 times 0.80. Your result is 6.8, which I would round up to 7 ounces. So you would need 7 ounces of pure grain alcohol and 1.5 ounces of spring water in your menstruum. And then, of course, you take your little measuring cup with a spout and you put 7 ounces of alcohol in it and 1.5 ounces of spring water to make up your 8.5 ounces of menstruum. And then, of course, you've chopped up your little honeysuckle flowers and you put them in a jar and you pour your 8.5 ounces of menstruum over it, put your lid on and shake it up real good, and your tincture is made. Now, I hope this is helpful. Lord knows I'm not a math teacher, so I pray that you all can understand this. Feel free to message or put in the comments if you would like another video of this and see if I can do any better. And that is the end of this video. And like I say, I pray that it's helpful, and I hope that you all will be out making tinctures and being confident in all that you do. Please share and like and subscribe to these videos, and God bless you and have a wonderful day.